James Otis Nall is from Fairfield, Alabama, where he wanted to grow up and be the next Willie Mays. After graduating from high school, Nall moved to Los Angeles to live with his sister and went to work for the U.S. Post Office before being drafted in the spring of 1966. He served in the 1st Platoon of Charlie Company, 4th of the 47th Infantry. When the 160 men of Charlie Company, 4th Battalion/47th Infantry/9th were drafted by the U.S. Army in May 1966, they were part of the wave of conscription that would swell the American military to 80,000 combat troops in theater by the height of the war in 1968. In the spring of 1966, the war was still popular, and the draftees of Charlie Company saw their service as a rite of passage. But by December 1967, when the company rotated home, only 30 men were not casualties, and they were among the first vets of the war to be spit on and harassed by war protesters as they arrived back in the U.S., including James Otis Nall. The battle for civil rights in the 1960s was fought on many fronts, not least in the U.S. military. As executive producer for the National Geographic Channel special, Brothers in War is inspired by Andrew Weiss's book The Boys of 67, which recounts the gripping, personal story of one of the last combat infantry companies to be drafted, trained, and sent to war in Vietnam. Together was gripped by racial conflict in 1967. Charlie Company functioned largely free of racial prejudice. Two stories, in particular, stand out. Willie McTeer and James Nall were both African Americans who had grown up in segregated small towns in the South. Nall, who grew up in a 3-room house with 10 siblings, remembers being repeatedly warned by his family not to look at white women. When they arrived for basic training at Fort Riley, neither McTeer nor Nall knew what to expect. Nall had never shared integrated facilities or drank from a white water fountain, and McTeer said he initially feared white GIS more than the Viet Cong. James Nall was interviewed in this documentary, with its first airing on the National Geographic Channel on Wednesday, March 26, 2014. He received the Purple Heart Medal and Bronze Star both for heroism after being wounded due to enemy action. He went past the perimeter to set up a Claymore mine to overrun the perimeter when he was hit. He was rendered partially blind but continued to fight alongside his fellow soldiers until they could maneuver to a better position. A Purple Heart is a solemn distinction and means a service member has greatly sacrificed themselves or paid the ultimate price while in the line of duty. Brother Nall is a charter member of the Abundant Grace Bible Church. Bishop Michael Jenkins is lead pastor, and Dr. James Jenkins, pastor emeritus. At AGBC, you can find him to be the church's most dedicated, willing worker and beloved by all. He is the adored husband of over 40 years to Mrs. Lily Nall, a beloved grandfather, brother, uncle, church member, and friend. He served as an E-4 specialist in the United States Army from 1966 to 1968, becoming a sergeant upon his arrival back in the United States. Brother James Otis Nall, thank you for your service.
Okay. I am Wallace Nall Boyd. I'm the 4th child of 12. And I'm the matriarch of the family now. And about Otis, he's a sort of quiet, but I used to tease him a lot. And he'd get mad because I used to say, he liked Spot, his friend. And his mama used to talk, didn't have teeth. And I used to tease him about that was his girlfriend. And that would make him cry. But Otis he was a nice, obedient child. But he couldn't stand that teasing, because I said, and plus he's stubborn whenever he got a whooping. He said, hit me again. I mean, he'd be saying that to mother or whoever. He was just stubborn. Whenever he got a whooping, he didn't get a lot of whooping because he wasn't a bad child. But anyway, I just love him to death. And he's a Christian.
I'm child number 8 of a family of 12. What I remember during the Vietnam era, we were in a small town in Fairfield, Alabama, where they kind of drafted most of the young men there that qualified for draft. And at that time, Otis was living in he had moved to California. And there were so many young men dying in my small city that when my mother found out that Otis was drafted to the service, all she did was just pray. And she said that she believed that the Lord would bring her son back. And that's the Vietnam era in Fairview, Alabama, and around James Otis and all. Yeah, of course she was nervous during those days because there was so many young men died. It was like 1963, the year that I finished high school. I remember that one of my classmates, he didn't make it through the summer after going to Bay. You know, we graduated May 31st, and before the end of the summer, he had died in Vietnam. So it was that rapid, and for such a small city, so many young men died. So by the time, I think he was drafted around 66 or 67, and quite a few had passed in that area. So I'm sure she cried alone, but all I know is she prayed and she felt that her son would come home alive, and he did. Otis was drafted out of California, so when he got out of the service, he came to Alabama, came and spent a month with us before he came back to California. And while he was there on that month visit, I decided I wanted to come back and go to California with him. And so on his trip back, I accompanied him. And we came back, and let me see, I had Charles, Otis, and I all got an apartment together. And that's how my life started in California.
Good morning, I'm Charles Nall. I'm Otis's brother. And Otis is he's 1 year younger than me. We're both, I'm 80, he's 79. And if I want to go back to the days to talk about Otis' character, you know, Otis growing up, Otis, my mother taught us how to love. She'd always say, love is not hugging and kissing. Love is what love does. And we do that. Raising 12 children in a small house. But we all loved each other, even up to the day. There was no fighting, none of that, no, nothing. But you take Otis. Otis is a really nice person because we was to go to parties and stuff. Otis would never, if they had punch, he would not drink any of that punch because he think it's been spiked. Otis never drank, even up to this day. Otis don't drink. Otis don't smoke. Otis has got great character. Otis is really a spiritual man. He's very spiritual. Otis is very spiritual. Otis is very generous. Everybody who knows him in the family knows he's generous. But you know, I know they want me to talk about him in his going into the Army. Otis went to the military, and when he went to the military, he came back home. And all the fighting he did in the military, he never had a gun in his house. He was they call a point man in the military. That's a man that can shoot you down at probably 100 meters or more. I remember when they came home, the LAPD wanted to draft him as uh, because of his skill with a gun. But that's when he put the gun away when he left the army. He don't own a gun. In fact, none of us out own a gun. My mother made sure we didn't have a gun in the house. And that's what that was Otis. Otis never, he don't have a gun in his house. And I think that's why he's so spiritual. And whatever he did in the military, that was for the government. But when he came back home, he doesn't drink, but he likes to eat.
Well, greetings to all. As the pastor emeritus of the Abundant Grace Bible Church, I have the pleasure of representing Dr. Michael V. Jenkins as our lead pastor in this gala event. Moreover, we want to express our appreciation to the host, Women's Ministry of the LA District Association, where my wife, Kathy D. Jenkins, serves as president. One of the honorees in our church member is Brother James Nall, whom I have known for 18 years. He is a Purple Heart recipient in the United States Air Force, or the United States Army, I should say, forces, a faithful, supportive church member, and a personal friend. I met Brother Nall while pastoring in a previous church, and he continues to be an enthusiastic support as one of the chartered members of the Abundant Grace Bible Church. And I recall how we would walk through the streets, talking with others about the love of God through Jesus Christ, and how the other members would push Brother Nall to the forefront because they knew that he enjoyed talking about the love of God. He was not bashful when it came to sharing how he feels about our Christ. I also remember when he would cook every week when he was in town, he would prepare breakfast, and we had to push people out of the fellowship hall to go to Sunday school and to enter into the worship service because they enjoyed that fellowship so much. He sang in the male's chorus and is a continuous, generous giver, is loved by all of the members of our church, and he is well deserving. Even my wife and I, as we celebrated our 40th year renewal vows from our, of course, wedding, I wanted him to serve as a groomsman. That is the level of respect and appreciation that I have for him. I want to close these words with the remarks of the Apostle Paul as he holds up for us a model of Christ-like living and encouragement to guide us in the way that we walk each day before our God. It comes out of Ephesians, the 3rd chapter, where it says that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded, may have the strength to comprehend with all of the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you might be filled with the fullness of God. And then the Apostle Paul ends at the beginning of Ephesians 4, when he says to walk worthy, to walk in the manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility, gentleness, with patience, forbearing one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. I think those words typify the life and character of Brother James Nall. And so we salute him in this gala event as we express our appreciation for the way that he serves within our congregation, and we trust within the community and beyond. God bless you and may he keep you. Greetings to all. As the pastor of the Abundant Grace Bible Church, I have the pleasure of representing Dr. Michael V. Jenkins as our lead pastor in this gala event. Moreover, our appreciation to the host women's ministry of the LA District Association, where my wife, Dr. Kathy D. Jenkins, serves as president. One of the honorees is our church member, Brother James Nall, whom I've known for 18 years. He is a Purple Heart recipient in the United States Armed Forces, a faithful, supportive member, and a personal friend. I met him while pastoring the previous church, and he continues to be an enthusiastic support as a chartered member of the Abundant Grace Bible Church. And I recall when we would walk the streets together along with other church members, as we would greet new people and introduce ourselves to them, our members would push Brother Nall to the front because they knew that he was not uncomfortable about talking about the love of God through Jesus Christ. And so they looked to him because of his leadership capabilities and his confidence to share. I also remember how often he would cook breakfast every week for an extended period of time before Sunday school. And we literally had to chase people out of the fellowship hall into Sunday school and into our church worship because they just enjoyed the fellowship that took place in that fellowship hall. And Brother Nall was in the midst of all of that. He always sang in the male's chorus and continues to be a generous giver. And he is truly loved by our entire congregation. He always sang, as I mentioned, in the male chorus. And we would get excited because during this pandemic season, we could trust that Brother Nall was going to come through that door and personally join into worship. We felt so highly of him, me and my wife, that as we celebrated our 40-year renewal vows, we wanted Brother Nall to be one of the groomsmen. I want to close this brief time by giving to you the words of the Apostle Paul and to hold up Brother Nall as an example of what the Apostle Paul meant when he talked about Christ-like living. It comes out of Ephesians, the 3rd chapter. And that section of scripture reads that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded, may have the strength to comprehend with all of the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ, that passive knowledge, that you might be filled with the fullness of God. And then he concludes that, beginning in that 4th chapter in the 1st verse, where he says to walk in a manner worthy of the calling which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. I believe that capsulizes the life that Brother Nall continues to live as he continues to walk constantly before the face of God. And so we commend him to you as we celebrate this time of this gayest occasion, and ask God's blessing upon him and each and every one of you as well. God bless you, and may he keep you.